On January 1st, 2026, tomorrow, the world enters a new industrial reality, one that Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, publicly warned about just days ago. A reality where one of the most critical metals in modern manufacturing becomes subject to unprecedented export restrictions from the nation that controls 60 to 70% of global supply. Let me be absolutely clear about what happens at midnight tonight. China implements a licensing framework for silver exports that will fundamentally restructure global supply chains. And when the CEO of the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturer and a leader in solar energy says, "This is not good," when someone with that much skin in the game raises the alarm, you need to pay attention. The warning nobody wanted to hear. On December 27th, 2025, Elon Musk responded to reports about China's impending silver export restrictions with 4 simple sentences. "This is not good. Silver is needed in many industrial processes." Those words, posted on his social media platform X, sent shockwaves through commodity markets already experiencing historic volatility. Musk didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. His companies depend on reliable access to silver for electric vehicle battery management systems, solar panel production, and countless electrical contacts and components. When you're building the infrastructure for humanity's energy transition, silver isn't optional. It's absolutely essential. And tomorrow, the rules governing access to that essential resource change forever. What actually happens tomorrow? The licensing framework that takes effect tomorrow isn't some minor administrative adjustment. This is a complete overhaul of how silver moves from China to the rest of the world. Under the new regulations announced by China's Ministry of Commerce in late October 2025, only large state-approved firms with annual production capacity of at least 80 metric tons and credit lines of $30 million can obtain export licenses. Think about what that criteria eliminates. Hundreds of small and mid-sized exporters who have served global industrial users for decades. Gone. Cut off. Shut out completely. This isn't happening in some distant future we can prepare for. This is happening tomorrow. In 24 hours, the entire structure of global silver supply chains fundamentally changes. The price. Already told the story. Silver hit a record high of approximately $86.62 per ounce on Monday, December 30th, 2025. A metal that began this year trading around $29 per ounce surged over 150%, posting one of its strongest annual performances in modern history. But here's what makes the timing absolutely critical. On that same Monday, after touching that record high, silver crashed by over 8% in a single trading session, the steepest one-day decline since February 2021. On Tuesday, it rallied more than 6%. Today, December 31st, as I'm speaking to you, silver trades around $72 per ounce, whipsawing through massive volatility that reflects one thing: absolute uncertainty about what tomorrow brings. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange raised margin requirements on silver futures twice in the span of 1 week, forcing traders to post significantly more collateral to hold positions. This happened as prices experienced wild swings after climbing above $80 for the first time. When exchanges take emergency measures like this, they're responding to systemic risk. They're trying to prevent a cascade of defaults in markets experiencing unprecedented stress. This volatility isn't speculation. This is the entire global financial system trying to price in something it has never confronted before: the potential loss of access to 60 to 70% of refined silver supply under conditions where the market already faces severe structural deficits. The deficit nobody solved. The global silver market has operated in structural deficit for 5 consecutive years, with demand in 2025 reaching 1.24 billion ounces, while supply lagged at 1.01 billion ounces, creating a 230 million ounce shortfall. 230 million ounces. That's not a rounding error. That's a fundamental imbalance where the world consumed vastly more silver than it produced. Where did those extra ounces come from? They came from inventories that have been bleeding out month after month. COMEX stocks are down 70% since 2020, whilst Shanghai inventories sit at 10-year lows. And tomorrow, the country that dominates global silver refining, the infrastructure that processes raw silver into usable industrial material, implements licensing requirements that could reduce international supply dramatically. Why China is doing this isn't about environmental protection, despite whatever official language accompanies the policy. This is strategic resource nationalism. This is China looking at finite silver reserves and recognizing that continuing to export vast quantities to support Western industrial development makes zero strategic sense. The policy reflects strategic resource nationalism, targeting critical metals vital to electric vehicles and solar energy sectors. China needs that silver for its own massive solar installations, its own electric vehicle manufacturing, its own electronics production. The country that controls the refining infrastructure gets to decide who benefits from that infrastructure. In December 2025, China recorded massive silver exports as companies rushed to deliver goods before the licensing regime kicked in. Those shipments temporarily alleviated supply pressures in Western markets. Tomorrow, that rush ends. Tomorrow, access depends on government-issued licenses subject to production thresholds most exporters cannot meet. The industrial demand catastrophe. Here's what makes tomorrow's implementation exponentially more dangerous. Industrial silver demand continues surging at precisely the moment supply gets choked off. Demand for silver and solar panels grew by 64% last year, passing jewelry as the single biggest source of demand, even though solar represents only 9% of global electricity production and approximately 2% of total energy production today. Think about that trajectory. Solar installations hit record levels in 2025. Electric vehicle production continues accelerating globally. Data centers powering artificial intelligence infrastructure require massive amounts of silver for electrical components and cooling systems. Semiconductors for military electronics, consumer devices, medical equipment. All of these applications require silver. All of these sectors are growing, not contracting. What happens when solar scales to 15% of global energy? 20%? The silver requirements become astronomical. And we're entering that growth phase tomorrow with supply chains facing unprecedented restrictions. Industrial applications now represent between 50 and 60% of total silver demand, making price volatility a serious concern for manufacturers who cannot easily substitute alternative materials. The mathematics of crisis. Let's do the arithmetic that should terrify every industrial planner watching this unfold. The global silver market ran a deficit of approximately 230 million ounces in 2025 under conditions where Chinese silver still flowed relatively freely through October exports. Analysts warn of 5,000 plus metric ton annual silver deficits. If exports drop 50%, that's over 160 million ounces on top of existing structural shortages. We're talking about combined shortfalls that fundamentally cannot be met by existing supply infrastructure. Mexico and Peru produce significant silver, but their combined output cannot possibly fill gaps left by restricted Chinese refining capacity. Building new refining facilities takes years and hundreds of millions in capital investment. Approximately 70% of silver is produced as a byproduct of base metal mining, meaning dedicated silver operations cannot quickly respond to price spikes. The math doesn't work, the supply chains cannot adapt fast enough, and tomorrow we cross into that reality. What Musk sees that others miss. Elon Musk understands something that many analysts have been slow to grasp. This is on to temporary supply disruption that markets can absorb through inventory drawdowns and modest price adjustments. This is a structural transformation of how critical industrial materials flow through the global economy. Tesla uses silver in battery management systems, electrical contacts, and solar installations. The company cannot simply switch to alternative materials without massive redesigns and performance compromises. Neither can the thousands of other manufacturers dependent on silver's unique properties. Its unmatched electrical and thermal conductivity, its resistance to corrosion, its reliability in demanding applications. When Musk warns that silver restrictions are not good, he's speaking from the perspective of someone trying to scale electric vehicle production and solar energy infrastructure in a world where access to essential materials suddenly becomes uncertain. His warning reflects the reality that industrial planning requires supply chain reliability. You cannot build the energy transition on unstable resource access. The global implications. The silver crisis that begins tomorrow extends far beyond commodity markets and industrial supply chains. This is about geopolitical leverage. This is about resource sovereignty in an increasingly fragmented global economy. The licensing framework allows for graduated escalation, from reduced quotas to complete prohibitions, depending on geopolitical circumstances, mirroring China's rare earth export controls where quotas were tightened incrementally over years. Think about the strategic implications. China can now modulate silver exports based on trade tensions, diplomatic disputes, or domestic priorities. The country that controls refining infrastructure controls who gets access to refined material. That's leverage. That's power. And tomorrow, that power gets codified into formal licensing requirements. Western nations suddenly face the reality that their renewable energy transitions, their defense electronics, their consumer technology sectors all depend on continued access to Chinese refined silver under conditions where that access can be restricted at Beijing's discretion. The market. Disruption. Already here. The physical silver market shows unprecedented stress patterns even before tomorrow's implementation. Silver futures hit a record high overnight on Monday, reaching $80 an ounce for the first time, before gains evaporated and the metal logged its largest single-day drop since February 2021. This is what happens when markets try to price in fundamental supply chain restructuring in real time. And when decades of relatively stable material flows suddenly face restrictions that could dramatically alter availability. When paper contracts and physical reality diverge so dramatically that normal price discovery mechanisms cease functioning properly. Lease rates, the cost to borrow physical silver, hit elevated levels throughout December as industrial users scrambled to secure metal ahead of tomorrow's deadline. This wasn't speculation. This was real. Companies with real manufacturing needs desperately attempting to lock in supply before the rules changed. What tomorrow actually means. Tomorrow, when China's licensing framework takes effect, we enter uncharted territory. We enter a world where the dominant player in global silver refining has implemented gatekeeping mechanisms that favor large, state-approved entities while excluding the small and mid-sized exporters that have historically provided supply flexibility. We enter a world where industrial planners must factor geopolitical considerations into material sourcing decisions, where supply chains that took decades to build face potential disruption based on licensing decisions made by foreign governments, where the cost of essential materials could spike not because of market fundamentals, but because of administrative restrictions. Elon Musk was right to raise the alarm. This is not good. This is a fundamental restructuring of how critical industrial materials flow through the global economy, happening at precisely the moment when demand for those materials accelerates due to renewable energy transitions and technology growth. The mathematics don't work. The supply chains cannot adapt quickly enough. The inventories that buffered previous deficits have been depleted. And tomorrow, January 1st, 2026, the rules change in ways that make solving these problems exponentially harder. The industrial crisis doesn't start tomorrow because of panic or speculation. It starts tomorrow because the largest controller of silver refining infrastructure implements licensing requirements that fundamentally alter global supply dynamics at the worst possible moment, when structural deficits already strain available inventory and industrial demand continues surging. Elon Musk saw it coming. He warned about it publicly. And tomorrow, we all find out just how right he was.